Yeah.
We are ready to get started at 60. 60 seconds. Okay.
He's going to be positive.
We're all looking over to my left, we can watch the.
Oh. We have soup, we have salad, we have everything's so funny. Like the tiniest person in the room, which I would dig in.
All right, let's get started. Everyone is going left off. That's okay. But we do know. I think we have it with the contingency. All paragraph 8, right, David? Yeah. Yeah, we do that. So what David and my goal is today is I'm going to get to page 10. That'll be an advancement of 5 pages, which might be a record. And but if we don't get that far, we don't get that far. But our thoughts are, if we get to page 10, then next month we'll finish it up. And then we'll be done with the deep dive with the agreement of sale, and then we'll go back to other forms that all of you or any of you want to cover. So that's kind of what we have in the plan, right, Dave?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's start with paragraph 9. As we may have mentioned this last month, but I think it's worth reviewing, and that is a change in buyer's financial status. It says that the change in buyer's financial status affects the buyer's ability to purchase. Buyer will promptly notify seller and lender to whom the buyer submitted a mortgage application. Any change in financial status includes limited to loss or change of employment, failure or loss of sale of the buyer's home, buyer having incurred new financial obligation, entry of a judgment against the buyer understands that applying for or incurring an additional financial obligation, they affect buyer's ability to purchase. So what is it that we always tell buyers, and mortgage people do pretty well also, is what? Don't buy a car, don't buy furniture, don't go out and buy furniture for that house, don't go buy appliances. Because what happens is the lender's gonna do a bring down on the credit. And if they see that you bought a new vehicle, or that you bought new appliances for $4,000, or you bought furniture, that could end the transaction. And that will happen. These are two people settlement. So you wanna, let the people know that you do not wanna incur any type of debt or make any big moves in your banking account. So don't, walk money through or anything like that. So, transactions can fall apart because of people incurring. And I can, speak from experiences, some years ago, I had, a buyer and a young couple. And, a few weeks before settlement, for some reason, we were getting back together and they drove in a very nice, big, new Bronco. And I thought to myself, well, that's the end of this transaction. And it was. And it was. So you gotta be, make sure that they know that. And I know that the mortgage lenders pretty much a good one will tell them also, but it doesn't hurt if everybody will tell them and remind them.
It's good to let them know, like, very early in the process, when you first start working with them, you know, that when you're reviewing how things are going to go, this is a really good thing to, you know, plant that seed early, and then when you're going under contract, find them, and then, you know, you might tell them too, you know, if you need to make any purchases, call your lender first, see if that's gonna have an adverse effect on your ability to buy a house.
Absolutely. And that takes care of credit. What about employment? What about employment? Buyer loses the job, they get laid off. That's what this says. They've got to notify you promptly that has happened.
And it could be, they have an opportunity to switch jobs. You know, it might even be a step up, and the bank is gonna have to verify that might employ.
Yeah, and you know, if obviously if a good opportunity comes along, person wants to take it, but you better. I would say they should have a conversation with their lender first to make sure. If they're stepping up, it probably will not affect.
That's
Does
what
it?
happened a few years ago to me, where they changed jobs because they were making more money. And they thought that would be a good thing, and the date for closing, we could not close actually, which shut it all down, because even though they're making more money. They still needed to, I don't know what it was, it created so long ago.
Maybe a probation period or something?
I think it was because of the timeline, the last.
It could be, you know, 6 months or.
Yeah. But because I didn't.
2 years.
Yeah.
In a situation where you find an agreement with sale with conventional financing in a way, but it's something else. Does the seller have the right to say, well, I don't want this to change, like, I don't want that, and just walk away from it?
Actually, if you have that situation, I think that then them have to be done. Because the seller does have to. Because, you know, the financing that they change to may not be something that, that is gonna work with something that the seller wants, and they've got the right to know, that's. Finance.
Yeah.
So if there is a change, and even in your finance, let's go back one page. Let's go back one page, the first mortgage on the property, page 4. First mortgage on the property, you put a mortgage lender in there, I think we talked about that last time, you put a mortgage lender in there. But if the mortgage lender changes, we need to do an addendum, that the buyer has changed. And have the buyer and seller change it, so you want to do that, that would be the same situation, yeah.
Particular case, I twice, but seller didn't want to agree, and then another one agreed to it. The problem was the appraisal was different. They went from a conventional to an FHA.
Right.
We specifically didn't advertise FHA because of certain conditions that I knew were adverse for that type.
Sure.
And sure enough, you know, so the deal ended up falling apart as a result of
That's slightly different. It's switching from conventional to FHA, and FHA has, house doesn't meet that FHA requirement, that makes it.
it was a multiple offer situation, you know, years ago, but it was, you know, almost felt like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, bait switch because they put the conventional financing.
Get the deal.
The other thing on employment, we said the lender will bring down credit. They also do a bring down on the your employment. Again, some years ago, but I had one that the buyer got laid off. But he didn't say anything to anybody because he thought he was gonna be called back to work. But they did a bring down, and that lender did a bring down warning of closing. And that deal fell apart because of the lawyer.
say, I worked in HR for many years and I was the one that would verify in the process, in the whole, let's see, between the months.
We're not doing-
Sometimes they're watching.
There you go.
So throughout the whole process, they're reaching out to us, HR, sometimes once a week, depending on what, you know, how long it is. They're reaching out constantly, has this changed? And sometimes it's yes or no, did the employment status change, or sometimes they're asking, can you verify how many hours per week and pay? So they're asking that multiple times. throughout the process.
Thank you for that.
And if it's through a temp agency, that could be a problem.
Yep.
I have one now. It's gonna fall apart.
Cause it's sometimes it's temporary, or it can end your assignment at any moment.
Well, this is a long term through a temp agency, but because it's through a temp agency. He had a job offer a month ago that they told him not to take because they didn't want him changing jobs. And that would have been a permanent position, and now this one that he's been with for a while, because it's through a temp agency, they're not.
See how things can go around?
You're checking.
Yeah. Any other questions on buyer versus financial?
It's just really good to show you, like, I'll do a buyer, recently, you need to do a buyer consult. You have to do a buyer consult before you're going out. You did that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, do a buyer consultation before you take anybody out.
Okay.
No,
You're very good at that, Kristen. Why don't you tell us the process with the buyer and, for the first time, and what you do?
We have a phone conversation, they wanna come into the property if they're in a hurry. But I would explain to them, the first meeting, we're gonna meet in the office, and it could be anywhere, it could be any office, or it could be a local place, I don't care if it's a restaurant or something, I don't care where it is, but we're gonna meet in a place where we can sit down and have a conversation, because documents need to be signed. I'm gonna email the documents to them the night before, so these are the things that we're gonna be reviewing. And, you know, giving you a heads up on them, I'm sure you're gonna have some questions, feel free to read them, if you need to go through them in as much or as little detail as you need to say of. We talk about the houses, we're gonna talk about finance, we talk about your lender. You know, but then I always meet at the office, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour. And I always tell them this is the only time we're gonna have to come here first, so if we find something today, fantastic, but if not, next time we'll go to the house that we're scheduled to see first, but we have to do this consult. 9 times out of 10, if I've worked with somebody who's never worked with an agent before, they never had this consultation before.
Right.
So all these little things that we're talking about, these little bombs, you know, we're trying to alleviate, you learn a lot by sitting down with people. You know, you learn a lot about what people want, what they don't. The communities that you've set up appointments for, sometimes don't work by the time you're done with that conversation. So it's an important thing.
I wanted Kristen to do that because it is important, you know, a lot of these, do not meet, buyers at the office, or as Kristen said, it could be a dump to dump, it could be anywhere where you have a little privacy and talk, but, it's very important to do that. And you're laying the ground rules, they're understanding what the process is, even if they own a home now, but they've owned it for 20 years, the process is a lot different years ago from now, so you need to have that consultation. I do the same thing, and I've done it for years as Kristen does. I tell the prospect that first meeting's gonna be at the office, and I tell them right up front, take 45 minutes to an hour. Because I don't want them to think that they're gonna, and this is why I started it here. I have an appointment Saturday afternoon, the husband comes in and we had about 6 houses they wanted to see, the husband comes in And, I said, where's your wife? Cause I didn't do it with his wife. Oh, she's out in the car, she's ready to go look at the house. Well, I was,
Oh, come on in.
so that's why I tell people right up front. First consultation, initial consultation, I take 45 minutes to an hour. I don't want them to look at their watch after 5 minutes and think that's gonna run out the door. So set the stage, you're in the control, you're in the control. So that's right.
And it's one thing always know in advance, when I send the paperwork in advance, they like that because they've read it, it's pretty boilerplate, and then they'll have a few questions here and there. People always want to discuss conviction, and then we're back. And my responsibilities and why we're only doing this for one day, you know, we always talk about that.
Right.
It's the stage for a better.
Oh, yeah, I have a lot more success. Just jumping. So. They're probably going to somebody else because all they do is they find something else on the internet, so they call in. So that's why.
Great to be people.
Well, that's opening, you know, quite frankly. Today's world, safety is a big factor. So, you want to get the, did you?
If you wanted to see a house, send over the paperwork, just like give your life and then over for them to review it and then we're gonna talk about it. I usually do like a phone consult. And they wouldn't call me back, they called me at 5 to 2, looking to get into the house too.
Yeah.
I said, in case you have to go for everything, you can send your driver's license and everything. I put the phone number as a forewarned, 19 criminal convictions for assault.
We don't want to see anybody on the news.
No.
Nobody, we don't want to see any of our names on the news.
That's where you can put the phone in and check it and then it's concentrate, so we have something.
Yeah, if you're not set up on, four, I think, you can do the PNA. Yeah, they have it, doesn't cost you anything, and it's well worth it. And give us right now, thank you.
The other thing is, you know, you're sitting, you bring them to an office, there's usually people there. You're introducing them, maybe your title, you know, we're not company, we're here, so the process is so streamlined. We need brochures on some things, we have stuff for, you know, it's all here. And people, I think, love papers, I don't know why, like, we give them something, oh, it's me, you know, not just listings, but it's information, it's copies, it's, you know, it's just, it's professional.
Yeah, I think, David, you can talk about, was that a walk-in? How you got them with, or if it was a rental prospect, and you got them, Marty was there, and you got them with Marty?
Yeah, it was a walk-in rental and I asked them, you know, why a rental, why not buy a house? He said, I don't think I can. And took him over, Marty was in his office, I took him in to see Marty and spent an hour with him or so. You know, a couple of months later, he was at a closing, bought a house.
So, don't just take the rentals as a rental. That's some questions with, today's world and financing that's available, you may be able to purchase rather than a rental.
I ended up with one rental listing that I have right now, and you know, the landlord wants like 700 credit, you know, which is really tough for most tenants. And every single person that calls me, I'm having a conversation with them about, you know, why aren't they buying? And most of them is because of the poor credit. And I've been giving them to one of the lenders, because they can do a free credit repair valuation with them and set them up with a strategy so that, you know, maybe in a year, these guys can become home buyers. And they're, you know, one person signed up with a commercial credit repair company, and you know, Maria can tell you more about those. They end up being very expensive. And this company, she told me, she goes, I don't have to pay any of my bills now, I just have to write one check to this company every month. So you know, you just have to wonder, like, where's the transparency on that, you know? And if you go through, you know, Marty has the same thing as Maria, basically, it's through the company. It's not gonna cost the buyer or the tenant anything to get on a program to, you know, make a kind of fast track the credit repair. And, you know, and to me, it's interesting. You think that if you just pay off your debts, you could repair your credit, and that is part of it. But there's a strategy involved, with which things are more beneficial to pay off first. And that's what the credit repair can help you out with. So it's a pretty interesting process.
Yeah, so you get that get that call for a rental, don't just turn it down and look at it as a rental. It could be a sale, you could put it into the sale, and if you get from sale now, maybe you do put them into a rental. And then you stay in touch with them and keep touching them through the year. And you could end up having a prospect next year for lots of opportunities out there. Any questions? See that? 20 minutes, we got through paragraph 9. Pretty good.
The new record.
All right, let's go into seller representation, paragraph 10. That's a water.
That's a paragraph.
Yep, another short paragraph. Actually, it is, so we're not gonna. Seller representation, the property is served by public water, community water, on-site water, or none. Or X. Or blank line there. So typically, we're gonna see public water or on-site water. There is still some communities out there that do have a community water. Have community water, but just be cautious, make sure that you're not putting community water into an area, for instance, as Penn Estates. Years ago, that was a community water system. It was owned by the developer. And quite a few years ago, they sold it to Pennsylvania American Water, which Pennsylvania American Water had bought up most of the community water systems in our area. So it's, you don't want to put community water, because that can cause you a problem when you get to the appraisal process. Pennsylvania American Water is a public water system. Yep, they're regulated by the PUC. Yep, so they are public water. And what might be something that we would write on the blank line? What type of water system would we put on the blank line? There you go. That's the biggest one I can think of, is shared well. So
Is that when they have like the mound on the house, like what we own?
that's septic stuff. Yeah, so that's a shared well. You'll see, once in a while, not a whole lot anymore, but what, developers did years ago, I'm trying to think of it, those are off of over in East Stroud, they're up on the hill by Blue Mountain. There's a community mountain, something mountain. Is that, no, it's a small community, but it developed years ago. And with small houses in there, when they built it, they were pretty much vacation homes. And of course, through the years, they turned into primary homes. Well, that developer would put one well in for 4 houses. 4 houses, and then there was a shared well agreement that said, you know, who paid for what, and you know, became that it was split 4 ways, and any repairs to the pump or replacement of the pump or anything like that, they would split it 4 ways. But those agreements didn't work out too well in the long term, because you have 4 people that is responsible for the expense of it, and one says, no, I can't afford it, I don't have any money, and you know, so anyway, but they're still out there. That's a shared well. That's a shared well. And you want to let the lender know that it is a shared well, because that could affect finance. So. Well, the appraiser may flag it also, but the lender, because it's not a public system or community system, the agreement, what happens if nobody wants to pay for any of the repairs or anything of that nature? I've seen so many of them end up being one person paying all. That's so that's why it could be affecting the water service, and that affects the value of the property.
Oh, okay, so for appraisal purposes.
Right.
then.
Yeah,
But they wouldn't not lend to you.
No, I have never had one that did, but they should know, yeah, that's right, that's exactly right. It's like a road maintenance agreement, so. We'll request that.
I know one house in Stroud Township that is, still gets their water.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
It's a line comes, you know, they have a water line run. Under the road, back up to the house, comes,
I'm about to list a property that same thing, but they built a tomb around it. Yeah, no, it's lit.
yeah.
But you know, you can learn.
And, no,
Yeah. There's still a lot of springs around. You can spring it if you're coming from Mount Pocono to, down towards Paradise Valley. And just outside of Mount Pocono, there's still a spring there that I see people getting.
Artesian well, and there's one down by the ball fields, Paradise too.
Drill your own well. No, I'm serious, that's the way around it, and I've had people do that. Drill their own well, because they didn't wanna be involved, because if you have four homes on the same well, not the same size system that one house has. So it's bigger pump, bigger, pressure tanks, just more expensive to do, and then you typically have a well building, well shed. That it's inside, there's a lot more maintenance to it, so I have had, several cases where they just, built their own, or built their own well. Yeah, I just had that, I sold Crescent Lodge a couple of years ago, and the owner's house was pulling the water off of his well on the resort. And then the daughter got the house, and then it became a feud with the new buyer, Crescent Lodge, about the water system, so she just built it in the well. So those are things. And then when you go, it's better financing, you don't have to worry about a well maintenance agreement. You know, you end up being the only ones paying for. And there's a meter on that well too, because it's electric, so somebody's got to pay a monthly electric bill for that.
And that community up in, on, Brunky Mountain. Where Bob was talking about, way up on the hill with all like vacation, things like that. And the reason the builder might have done that years ago, he might have had to go, you know, 600 or 700 feet. From that, up on top of that little mountain, to get, a good water supply, so rather than punch holes 700, 600 feet, whatever, for each cottage, you know.
Yeah, and he was selling very economic.
So in a situation like that, where there's 4 people on one well and you drill your own well, do you have to have the other 3, 2 from the well maintenance agreement?
I don't think that there's a release. Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I had one not that long ago in Lakes, and that ended up building his own well. I don't remember if he had any release, he just built his own well and said.
It's an attorney, like really, you're like, oh, well, you know, this building could have replaced your on this.
Yeah.
You already come in because you have your extra thing, and it could be something, you know. Yeah.
You know, maybe I've not had experience. But the situation that I've had, nobody was paying for the repairs and nobody was doing it. So I think that homeowner had a good argument. Look, I'm not gonna be part of something to pay for everybody else.
And in Rick's case, you know, who's gonna share the cost of maintaining that mausoleum that goes over the.
it has, there.
So Andrew had a question about artesian well. Artesian,
I had a lot,
listed as artesian well on it. You guys know about that. He's claiming that the previous people used it for their water source. But I went there and there's like an outbuilding built over it, filled with beer cans. So we gotta get some of it cleaned out.
Yeah.
Well, gonna go in and see if it's.
That's the water, have a water test. Yeah.
So the artesian just means that it's underground is pressurized, right? There's enough water pressure that forces it up, like similar to the spring, but there's water pressure that drives the water up.
They still use the pump then or?
Probably won't do it. Because you're gonna have to fill a pressure tank.
Every once in a while, just one, not too long ago, across a drill well that so much water in it. And homeowners, it's always that, way. It always had water. Coming out. Always had water. Yeah. But in that case, even a spring, if the house has a spring on it, you know, if you want to note there. Now, that's on site, so now the question is, on site or do I run blank line? Could be the sell the slip, one that spring, but it's good for the line, and it would not hurt to check it on site and still on the blank line, put spring. But springs have very tasty good spring water, anything better. Right, David? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can have a spring. Okay, on water. Sewer, public sewer, community sewer disposal system, 10 acre, individual lot. System, we're selling a house with a septic system on it, which one are we gonna check? Okay, on-site sewage, we're gonna check off individual on lot. Notice number one, is that what you said? Okay, everybody agree with that? No. Okay. Now, if you read that, notice number one. He's telling you what you need to do to put a septic system on the property. So you say, well, how in the hell do I need to be concerned about that? And why is it, why is that notice on there when there's an on-site septic system already on the house? So the Storage Facilities Act says that you have to notify a new buyer what the process is to put a septic system on your property that you already have a septic system on. And the reason they do that is because if that current system fails, they want everybody to know what the process is to be able to put a septic system on. So that's why it refers to notice number one, even though there's already a septic system on. And then again, you go back to public sewer, if it's in an area that's served by a public sewer system, and again. We don't have a lot of community sewage systems anymore. Pennsylvania Water. Called Pennsylvania Water, but it's also Pennsylvania Sewage because they do operate in by sewage treatment plants. So that is make sure that it's public, but there are still some communities around. All right, you can read the other notices that's on there. If you see the one that says 10 acre permit exemption to sewage notice number 2, that's any area that we're covering. There's nothing that applies to that one. There is no 10 acre exemption. There is counties up in the northern tier of our state that has a lot of wide open areas on it. Get up into Tioga County, Sullivan County, and those counties, a lot of it wide open. They allow the 10 acre exemption up there. If you have 10 acres, you don't need to get any septic permit, or don't need to get anything. You can just put any type of system on it that you want. So that's what that 10 acres is. Yep. But not where we are.
So you go back up in section B real quick, B1, just because of recent experience. This is the one that says holding tank, you'll see sometimes. You know, seller might think there's a holding tank and it's actually a septic tank.
Right.
But so septic tank has a. Intake, of course, comes out of the house, goes into the tank, and it also has an exit hole where it goes out into the drain field. Or cesspool or wherever it's going. The holding tank doesn't have an exit, it just gets filled up and has to get pumped out. There's this kind of fresh in my mind because I got an inquiry today about our property up in Stillwater Lake Estates. And that house is on the lake. And it has an in-ground septic. And there's one on the sister lake, the bigger lake. You know, probably a few hundred yards away. That I showed, I don't know, a week before last or something like that. That had an in-ground they had to dig out the entire old septic system, all the piping or whatever it was in there, they had to dig out that whole area. And they put in, because it's the proximity to the lake and water table and everything, they had to put in a holding tank. And the holding tank is 4,000 gallons. That, so I called Order and said, you know, what would they be getting into? And several times a year, you know, maybe 8 or 9, could be 10 times a year. Two people living in that house would have to have that 4,000 gallon tanks pumped at about $950. They get a discount for being on a regular thing. If it was just one, it would be like a one-up, it would be $1,200, but since they'd be doing this like about every 6 weeks, you know, it's gonna be $950. So that's like an HOA fee. Just for washing your clothes, taking a shower.
Because I've put that in on meetings and what the septic systems there over in Tobyhanna Township side. And there's some failures going on that cannot be addressed because the properties are too small.
Yeah,
You know, you've got like 0.19 acres, 0.23 acres over there. And so these people have cesspools and they have to be pumped out every couple of months.
yeah.
You gotta be really careful, especially if you're gonna be selling STR. You gotta know what you've got.
That has an in-ground system, has a nice big lot and everything right on the lake, and that was a concern I had, why I walk away from that. Who knows what they'd be getting into, or they even get an estimate on that as a buyer.
Yeah, the challenge is to buy a house on the lake that has an in-ground septic system. And now your septic system, because of malfunction, contaminates the lake. Who's gonna be responsible for that contamination? Yeah, you are.
And there's no, you know, you could call up too, like I called Arrowhead, their utilities up there. And just to check, like, you know, is there a possibility of this house getting in the public system? Make on your community system and like, nope, we're not going there. We're not going that there, it's stopped like, you know, 150 yards away. No plans to extend.
I would think to be able to point on it.
Yeah,
So, you know, you get clients who just rental, it's a huge thing over there. You have to be really careful of what you're buying.
I was buying a short-term rental, I think I'd buy a short-term rental. Like that. And that's what I'm doing.
If you're on the gold property, you're okay.
Yeah,
You know, but they're still having issues over there too, they're wanting to go into their temple. People are going to different houses, there's a lot of things,
yeah.
so it's interesting challenge.
Keeping housing stock, you know, all the on-site septic, we're seeing more and more. The things is more than septic stock. So just be aware and make sure you know what you're getting into. And something like Dave's talked about, that's certainly thinking with the solar. But that's another reason why you, the buyer's agent, looking at these things. Start questioning, you know, what's the septic system? Because, you know, if that was the case where they got breathed over and someone discloses they're being the buyer, and they end up buying a house, and they find out that 36 weeks, they got a septic truck in the yard. Probably gonna be looking for somebody. Make the septic. For use.
Now, that's the name around, for the spot that excavate what was there. You replace it with a mound system, you could be in a ranch home or a chalet, and you're looking out your front window, and only see the mound of grass. Your view's gone, which makes the property valuable.
With whale report there.
Just to put your pink flamingos. in.
The other question, septic system. Is, if you're listening or you're looking at a buyer looking at a home that was built back in the early 70s, late 60s and before. You want to make sure that it is an actual septic system, not a cesspool. Septic systems came about starting about at the early 70s. That was pretty much on site septic. My house was built 71. It had a septic system, but there was no conventional. I'm gonna back up. But anyway, you want to make sure that it is a septic system and not a cesspool. And if the seller cannot verify to me that at some point there was a septic system put in, I'm gonna put it in this thing that is a cesspool. And somebody could say, well, that's not a negative. Well, yes, it is. I will tell you that if you say that it's a septic system and it turns out to be a cesspool, you can sue. Nobody's been sued. They were told that a cesspool turned out to be septic. That's why, if I'm in doubt, I'm not sure, but they say it's cesspool. And then just one other thing on water and septic, just mentioning those houses built back in the sixties. Back in that era, there was no isolation distance of 100 feet between the well and the septic. It could be anything, And I had one in the West End, the septic system was 60 feet from the well. And the home inspector said that the homeowner had to either put a new septic system in or drill a new well. Unfortunately, I had the knowledge to say that's a bunch of crap. And so I called the regional enforcement officer and Chester Hill Township, and he said, "Tell him to call me." He said, "That's been working in the 60s." He said, "There's absolutely no reason why you have to put in a new well and a new septic." So, and so the buyer, and then satisfy the buyer, but it was something that certainly alarmed the buyer, not my buyer, my listener. Certainly alarmed the buyer. Over there.
No.
Danny's making noise.
Uh,
Yeah, of course.
How was your lunch? Good. Hey. Moving on, David. Sorry.
Going back to the festival, which one, so you were a buyer side, which one do you need to select? The
Okay, on the buyer side, if, I would put it on the blank line there, says, yeah.
Thank you.
Lots, any questions?
And you will not be through today.
Okay. Paragraph C, really, fellows not aware of any historic preservation restrictions regarding the property, and I can otherwise be stated. Again, they should be on the on the seller disclosure, so you could reference that. But these type of questions you may not know as the buyer's agent filling it out, but the listing agent, should put in there if there is any historic. It's a couple of these things throughout the agreement, you may not know, but the listing agent should be putting it in maybe accurate, but that is one that should be disclosed on the seller disclosure. So I always, review that seller disclosure, prior, obviously, certainly, yeah.
So aside from the Hill District in Stratford, where would we encounter that?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's the only area.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether East Stroudsburg has any historic area or not.
Not aware of it, and I think you could apply, if you have an old house, you could apply for that. But,
Yeah, sure.
Well, if you're in the district, like at Scott Street that I sold, I represented the seller. You know. I did make everyone aware of the fact that if you live in a historic area. If you wanna do repairs, it could be more costly if there are restrictions. You know, depending on where you are. You know. The roof has to be a certain way, it has to look a certain way, there's a list of things that you know. Do.
Yeah,
If you find
You
that.
have to apply, you have to go through a board. Just want people to know, even like, representing the buyer, I wanted the buyers to.
absolutely. Yeah, I guess it's the house on.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
The elevator, the elevator.
At least unless I missed. Yeah.
read the big one, yeah. Get a history of that. That house is a.
Yeah.
That's. The whole stuff that. All the reasons involved there.
The borough and girls on Borough County. But I think it's on the website. First website.
Yeah, so they're the review board. Okay.
So for instance, the one on that I have on Thomas Street. That goes under contract. I want to make sure that it's going to be subject to the review. Because that could entail costs that maybe the buyer is not aware of, although people that come to their bar, they're telling them that up front, but. Yeah, it's not a matter that you're just gonna go in and throw a little window in front. Okay. David, you wanna cover land use restrictions? Pretty easy.
Sure.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, okay, so, just review things, we have some, Act 319 in this area. There's definitely some open space. So just, conservation reserve program that I'm not familiar with.
It's Creek, CREP. That's what it says. Paragraph D. The right hand side, CREP, Creek, Conservation Reserve Program.
Just, try to find out if any of the properties are in that, the Act 319, somebody wants to develop it or whatever, they have to. They should, be aware that they may have to pay back taxes if they're gonna, jump it up, or what they can do, they should look into. What their rights and responsibilities would be if the property is in that, or maybe they could put it into one of these programs. But that's, the buyers need to check it out. There's I showed a house, no, this is a couple of years ago, but there's a house in Cherry Valley. That went under an easement with the nature service. You know, for, I don't know, a couple hundred acres, something like that, which is a terrific thing, because it's gonna preserve that beautiful area in Cherry Valley. However, the restrictions were very strict. Like they couldn't, you know, those hundreds of acres, they couldn't, my buyers wanted to put in a swimming pool, no swimming pool. And it was very restricted, like you couldn't cut a tree down in your front yard without getting permission, so they ended up walking away from it, but, you know, so there's. You know, you just, everybody has to look at the cost benefit of when you're getting into a property like that, you know, just like an HOA, it could be restricted, and an easement like this. These things might end up being restrictive, to the point that the buyer's not interested, but it also might be restrictive to the point that makes it more interesting.
Something like that, I don't think we can reserve their restriction on the size. You have to 10 acres. Is there, I've never had it before.
Yeah, I'm not,
How you get the information as to whether a property is subject and
yeah, it would be reported and, the first place I would look is on the tax record, because a lot of them, I do know, like to clean and green properties are marked that they're clean and green, or that they haven't. Typically, what happens is tax are, that's what I would. And, you know, as far as the regulations on all these programs, you can go on, Monroe County's website, and they do have them on there. Green and green is, the prominent one that we encounter, and that you can, get the, details on that. But you will see somebody owns 15 acres, they got a house on it. They may have, because they're over 10 acres, they may have the property in put in green. And if the new buyer wants to leave it the way they have it, but if the buyer wants to cut off 5 acres,
It's 7 years back.
7 years back that. And I've had that negotiated. You pay the back tax, but buyer is out. That case is where it's split.
Oh, the fire, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, but it depends on the seller, yeah, it depends on the seller and negotiations. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's right. Yeah. It depends on the township, yeah. Depends on the township.
The office, just throwing it out there. They live in a street farm. And they want big land. It's true. That's the whole thing. I don't know why. I don't know why. Why do they want to, because they're like, oh, you know, we have all these different farms, we're really looking for ostriches, because I've been following it lately, because I have a client who's interested in the parcel in town.
Okay.
And, it's in Ross Township, and, they were just talking about ostriches for whatever reason, they think it'd be great to have an ostrich farm. Have no. So I know, what do you do? I do, the farm, what they get, the benefit to an ostrich, like the grass, but I just. But it's funny what you see on, you know, like large, I had a parcel years ago in Stroudsburg, and it was like it had like a 10 acres worth of water, and the client wanted to put yurts on them. And how was that, you know, STR was just becoming a thing, it was pre-COVID, but he wanted to have floating yurts all over. So yurts, they're like little tents that float on the water, they're just like little houses and like really heavy on them. And yeah. But it's like, in talking to the buyer, you're only gonna find a property that's gonna allow yours. First of all, find something waterway that's gonna be, right, then you want yours on it, like. So you really have to know.
Oh, absolutely.
Looking for.
Yeah, you know. Getting off the topic is one of the reasons. It's gonna be mentioned, that even selling residential homes, the buyer wants to do with that home. You know, a very typical one is Rick RVs. Tractor trailers, and somebody that who is a professional buyer. They have an 18-wheeler. What goes on the property? What can do with it? So you gotta be careful and know what your buyer is. You can, yeah. I think it's, some of the townships have ordinances that you cannot. Keep a RV on your property for longer than 2 weeks. And that is, so if you're going out on a trip, you can back it up and everything, but you can't put it in the township, and I'm not sure if it's still valid, but they had an ordinance where you can have an RV on your property, but it had to not be from the street here, so you had to park in the back. So anyway. I mean, yeah.
I sold a house about 9 years ago in an HOA, and the guy's a truck driver, and he goes, "I want to park my truck here." And I said, "You're not gonna be able to, in an HOA, they don't, simply don't allow it." And he said, "Oh, yeah, well, I'll show them." And he's still parking his truck on his property. 8 years later, he's still parking a truck in an HOA on his property, and he has not had it. No,
You gotta see the size of this guy. Nobody's messing with him. He did what he wanted. Okay. We all good? Real estate exposure one, we're well aware of that. We're aware of that. Public or private easements. Seller representing that, as of the date the seller signed this agreement, no public improvement of any homeowner association assessments have been against the property which remain unpaid.
Where you want your seller, if you're getting presented with an offer, you fill this out.
Right.
How lucky are we with that?
What's that?
How lucky are we getting that?
How lucky are we getting that?
No. The seller's gonna be like, oh, let me just disclose it.
Yeah, they should disclose it on the selling disclosure, but that's what they always do.
There's so many outs for both buyers and sellers. I feel like there's so many outs
Yeah.
out of this transaction from both buyers and sellers, like every page.
it's, definitely protecting. That's the basis of it, it's, every time we do a lawsuit, we get another paragraph.
Yeah, but Dave's right, it's in protection. When I started in the business, our agreement sale was 8.5 by 11 on page. And at the bottom, we left with the buyer's estimated cost. Seller,
It's the same form.
that's on the same form, 1 page. Now we're up to 14 pages. And it's all because of all the stuff that's come along the way. And back then, we had no home inspection, with caveat emptor. And what caveat emptor is? Your licensing. What is it? That's what it is.
Beware.
Yep, buyer needs to beware, caveat emptor, right, beware. And that's what, that was built homes back then. At home. What's that? Great. I was going to tell you, even though, it was volume back then, but I think we had less lawsuits then than we have now.
Taking breath from the lawyer.
Okay, paragraph 11. Tell us about paragraph 11, Dave. Wait, dependency. Page 7.
Yeah, when, on, 10 real quick.
Well, technically,
Highway occupancy.
oh, yes, thank you.
there are times when if you're filling a lot and it's on our road, especially a state road. They're gonna have to get a highway occupancy permit before they put in the driveway. The state will come out. And they're gonna wanna see like line of sight, if there's a curve. How, you know, how close is that curve? If there's a hill, how close is that hill? And they're gonna tell you whether or not you can put a driveway there. And where that driveway has to be on the property, if it's allowed. And that is not something that happens like overnight. Like, you know, I had friends that sold a lot out in Neola. And they started that months ago. And, you know, before I even had a listing. And they still hadn't had word from PennDOT. 2 years. Yeah, 2 years waiting for highway. So this,
Yeah, I know you had the 5 acre parcel out on Cherry Lane, or Cherry Valley Road. And it was a somewhat of a challenging parcel, because that's for the state road. It took him 3 years to get a driveway permit for that house. Took him 3 years to get a driveway permit, and then because of the site distances, his permit is only coming out of the driveway is only to make right-hand turns, can't make left hand coming out of the driveway. Now, there's nobody around that's going to force that, but that's what they did, because it's kind of coming up over a little bit around the curve and up a hill. And site distance is there, it took him 3 years to get that free.
In advance,
Yeah, he did have perfect,
here's it would have been.
yeah.
Keep that in mind for even residential properties, if they didn't require an HOP before, they are requiring now.
Yes.
So it could be. Basically, I was again, see that, on that, so there's money is over there.
Is that right?
Yes.
So the driveway is already there, and they still are making you get a HOP.
This is the concept.
This is my deli. So I can't even demo it until I get the HOP, so my demo permit is expired now.
You've been talking about this probably for a long time. I see it every day.
Yeah.
And I'm just,
I left it with you.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
Question.
And that's an existing dwelling.
Existing driveway.
Yep.
So even on, anything on 209, I understand is gonna be basic.
Yeah, they were,
that's been there a long time.
From 1920.
I used to deliver milk there.
So they are changing.
Well, It's males Brody. They had a gas pump on. They delivered it with horse and wagon. Oh, did you? Okay. Welcome to
deliver milk.
Okay.
Deliver milk? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
It was, the past, Sheriff Sebring.
Sheriff Stephen got me my job. We have Valley Dairy.
Before mini marts.
No, it was in 60.
Did you have to keep it around the floor to the town?
Yeah, I have to tell you very quickly. I checked in at the doctor's office some weeks ago. I checked in the doctor's office. And did you hear this?
No, your authority.
So I checked in the doctor's office. And what's your birthday? 5/29/27. He says 19. I said, no, 18. I typed in 18. Fuck that line. Think you got me on that one. I was wondering through that, we didn't agree on. That's okay. Where are we?
Into the thing.
Waiver contingencies.
Okay, waiver contingency, this agreement. If this agreement is contingent on buyer's right to inspect their property. Or to verify insurability, environmental conditions, boundaries, certifications. Zoning classifications or use or any other information regarding the property. Buyer's failure to exercise any of the buyer's options within the time set forth in this agreement is a waiver. If it's whatever you have in your contingency period, they don't act upon it in that. During that contingency period, they have to effectively waive the right to do so. Buyer accepts the property and agrees to the release in paragraph 28 of this agreement.
That's the paragraph that gets, agents in trouble. Because when you have inspections in the contingency period, and we'll relate it mostly in inspections, so that's the normal contingency. And we have those timelines in there. That's why those timelines are extremely important, that you stay within them. Because if your buyer does not get the inspection completed and reply to the inspections during that time period, they waive those inspections and they're buying the property. So you're on the buyer's end, you don't want to have to make that call, say you're out of contract and you didn't act on time, so you're buying a house. Because that's what I mean.
That paragraph probably responsible for more lost sleep among you
Absolutely.
than any of the paragraph.
Correct.
Buyer did not respond within the inspection contingency period. Sent us a laundry list of repairs and credits that the buyer wanted 4 days after the contingency period expired, 4 days. So of course we brought it to her attention that, you missed that whole, it's over. She said, no. Read paragraph 13A. Where the 10 days, right? She didn't continue to read that line, where it says within, from date of execution.
Right.
So she was an conception that the inspection contingency period started the day from when inspections were done. Big, I lost sleep for her. I don't. It's like, I'm gonna tell the buyer now that you messed up. Now the buyer's fighting, right, you can't negotiate, you can't forget.
Yeah.
And, furthermore, I think we have to address that the buyer that waived those inspections and has to let property is. So now we're waiting for the appraisal. That much, big.
Yeah. See how important knowing the contract is? I'm not sure how that turned out or how it's gonna turn out, but I could see where that agent could end up losing the portion, if not all their commission.
So, the buyer can terminate.
No,
Then, if the contract's moving forward, right, so now we're waiting for the appraisal. Everything's still moving forward.
Okay.
We haven't heard anything, since last week, so
yeah,
she kept trying,
Is it recent?
seller still, no.
Yeah.
Damn.
See, there's always a moving part, right?
Yeah, right.
You have to, when you're presenting this, like the seller says, oh, well, they're past the inspection contingency period. And you can ask the seller, if you're in a major way, well, you know, we don't have the resale certificate yet. They can still, you know, so, yeah. You have to kind of look at things like holistically in the big picture. When there's different moving parts, you know, specifically, that's what this says, for this specifically, but there's other parts of it, you know. What's in your best interest? You know, are they gonna terminate for the resale, if not for this, but in this case, you get to go right specifically to this paragraph. Because there's no other contingency.
Yeah, and who's going to look at it? Or make some of those repairs? The agent. The buyer was just being picky on a lot of the stuff. Yeah. Yeah, but that can make you nervous too, because if they're that picky, but anyway, don't get yourself into that. The moral of the story, don't get yourself into that position, right? Don't get yourself in that position. Now, the HOA part of it. That's why I stress and stress and stress. Get your sellers to get that resale certificate and get it to the buyer as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Paragraph 16 in the agreement of sale. Get it to the buyer as soon as possible. Because that paragraph 16 says, and that's what the law says, is the agreement of sale is contingent upon the buyer getting the resale certificate, and they have 5 days to review that. And within that time, even getting the certificate, the resale certificate, they can say, no, I can't live with it. They don't have to give you a detailed answer. I can't live with it, and they can void the contract. They can terminate the contract. So very important to get that resale certificate. I know some sellers do push back on it, because I hear it from I'm selling. So I don't pay for it until I know that the people have the mortgages, their mortgage commitment, and they have the inspections done. And I emphasize, well, you can take that route if you want. One, the law doesn't say that because you've got a certain amount of days to do it. But if you take that route, understand, buyer can walk. Buyer can walk it. And I've seen all the terminations that come through our office. And there's several there, paragraph 15. And I know that probably the larger percentage of time, bigger percentage of time, not actually paragraph 16, they're canceling on, terminating on, it's their adamant to have it be. So. Okay. So. Well, here, David, I asked, when you call one of us and you ask about inspections, first thing we'll ask you, where are you at in the inspection period? That's where I get agents. Man,
And if you think you're in the negotiation period, but you haven't submitted a buyer reply to inspection, then you're not in the negotiation.
that's right.
The buyer reply to inspection initiates the negotiation period. If you don't do that, the contingency period is over and the inspection is over.
Onward. Due diligence period, some of this was just covered on it.
You wanna go back to 12A, or you want 12A?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, just, you know, the rights and responsibilities, right, which sellers are often resistant. They don't really want to inspect it. Done, right, because they think that for some reason that they have to absolutely say yes to everything, so they don't want to inspect at all, but if there's inspections are elected, they have to provide access to the inspectors. and appraisers and insurance representatives, so let your sellers know. They have to provide access to these people, to the agent, right, and A2, right, 12A2. Buyers may make 2 pre-settlement walkthrough inspections of the property for limited purpose of determining that the condition of the property is as required by this agreement, and the intended buyer's right to these inspections is not waived by any other provision of this agreement. So if, say your buyer, for whatever reason, they waive all the inspections, they still get 2 pre-settlement walkthrough to see that the condition of the house is in what had been agreed upon. So you can do one, and those are really, really valuable. Do you think that, for one, if there's repairs that were agreed upon during the inspection period, and you want to go in and see if they, replace the electrical panel, whatever it was, that's a good thing to do, 4 or 5 days ahead of time, because if it wasn't done, then you have time before settlement to seek some remedy. If you go to a house where you're pretty sure the sellers are gonna be challenged on the clean out, or if it's a vacant house and it's still full of stuff, it's a good idea to do a walkthrough. That way, there's time to seek a remedy if the house doesn't look like they've been doing anything, and that can take time, it's call the listing agent, say, hey, how are they making out with the clean out? There's not a fingerprint on anything here. It's exactly the same way that it was 4 weeks ago. It's a good time to do things, check on it early. You're within your rights to do that. And I would say it's your responsibility to do that as a buyer's agent. You don't want to walk into a house full of stuff or repair half an hour before closing. And then what are you gonna do? You're gonna extend, time's gonna pass, the deal's gonna die. How are you gonna work it out? If you have 3 or 4 or 5 days ahead of time, you have an opportunity to work these things out in a much less, emotional or charged environment.
What I was looking for, and I know it's in here. Who can attend the inspections? Who can attend the inspections?
Jimmy, especially Uncle Jimmy.
Yeah.
Would open the door.
The people on the contract, the agent, or agents, buyer, somewhere, you have the right to be there, I don't know that, but you do have the right to be there. But the buyer's agent and the buyer. It's not for Uncle Louis to come in and give his opinion, or it's not for the parents to come and look at the problem. Well, I just want the parent to see it.
Why do you not recommend we go to?
What's that?
Did you say you don't recommend we go to inspection?
Sellers, listing agents, I don't attend them. And I don't attend many home inspections when we have a buyer either.
I'll say yes.
I'll say ask. Now, I would tell you what I do is, if depending on the buyer, if they're a little uncomfortable, I meet them at the house for the inspection, and I let them know up front. I can't stay for the whole inspection, but I'll introduce you to the inspector. I don't stay for the whole inspection. And that first opinion is not a good use. You're gonna get the report, so we need to sit there through the whole inspection. Unless you're sure you want to do it 1 or 2 times, on the inspection, it's okay. It would not make it. But there's more valuable things you do time than inspection.
Big Bensley, mandatory that the fire agent attend their inspection, and they actually charge the seller a fine. They will, if they know you're there, they will come around, and I've had this happen. couple times, they'll check to make sure I'm present. Just to, you know, and they want the cats back for everybody at the end of the time, so it depends on the community.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I know, but that's strict. I have no idea, I have no,
It's not very-
no, it's not, it's a gated. It's a gated community, and you know, they give you passes to get through the gate, but their requirement is that if the buyer is having an inspection, the inspector to be there, the buyer can be there, and they month, and they will come. Yeah, I don't agree with it either, but it's,
I feel like it's a distract.
I agree too.
That's why, because I feel like they should be paying attention to it. Yeah.
Exactly right. Big accident. I sold a house up there and, and they used our first time, but the way the rocks were aligned, right, they made it. I don't care about what the rocks are, and you're.
Specific documents, that's it. But you, when you form your resale, they will not give you a resale certificate in that digest. So if you're doing an inspection there, you have to make sure, or you're not waiting inspection, so make sure you're just doing septic there.
I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far
But anyway,
Legally, they might really not be allowed to withhold retail certificate for whatever reason.
I agree with you, but you know, you want to get that, you know, it's like, you want to get it done, you get it.
all, how many days the HOA has by that, resale. They can't hold it up because of the. Now, I could see where they would, get a resale certificate that, prior to selling, that's gotta be provided.
They want it. They really want it.
Yeah, they need some. Go to their meeting. Trade union.
Big vessels, big vessels.
Big vessels.
It's a big vessel.
Regarding what you said about. I've been doing that training at PMAR for the last Tuesdays, that was the end of. And we just talked about how certain cultures, the parents, it's not just let me go with you because, you know, I wanna see what you're getting, it's they have input in the children's decisions on a house. How do you handle something like that?
I think in those cases. I think those. But, you know, I actually. When. We. 20-year-old. Look at. We agree that we got to deal. I don't know the company. They get on. By. And. That. So many times that. I am waiting for this.
Sometimes it's
Right?
so the parents are chipping in, but they want to have.
That's true.
Yeah. I just have a question about where heating and utilities.
Yes.
Because just in this example, you have a house that has a propane fireplace, but there's no bottle of propane. Then you have a house where there's a bottle of propane, but it's empty. So like me, if there's no propane present, I don't think my seller get propane to prove that the fireplace works or doesn't work. But if it's empty, I make them get a minimum. What is your take on it?
You get away with it? You get away with it?
What's that?
You get away with it?
Get a big one. Yeah. I'm serious, we do.
If it works, why fix it?
I'm just curious what you would do, like, so you're listing a house and you see that there's no propane attached. they're gonna probably wanna know, I'm not gonna ask them to, oh, go get a bean company to come and drop a bottle of propane. But if there's a bottle there and it's just empty, I would ask them to put, it's like heating fuels, I thought of
Yeah.
I don't care about the grill, it's not attached to the house.
Well, but yeah.
True.
For inspections.
Okay.
Let's say about gas bill. Give it a gas bill.
Fired up.
I've had to, buyer bring a little bottle of gas for the inspection. Because the seller says they're not gonna do it, however, it's pretty clear, it's even in bold. 12A3.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff is just, how cooperative is your buyer gonna be? They just said, the buyer brings a small gas tank, get a 20-pound tank, keep it in your car. Oh, but that you get into a situation. Depends on your buyer, depends on your seller, but I would recommend, and I did a couple of times, is. You got a gas grill on the deck, take the 20-pound tank, I'll hook it up. And you'll. The seller's gonna have to hook it up, because the inspector doesn't, they won't turn on a breaker. So if they won't turn on an electrical breaker, they're not gonna hook up a gas tank, but yeah.
It helps to have a conversation, so. Part of the inspection, you gotta unhook the lids, tanks, make sure it's. So it's. To help you walk through the contract, a lot of conversation up front.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. That. You shouldn't be having conversations with people. At the moment when. It's hitting the fan, right? You need to. You're at the listing appointment. And you get the listing signed. And then you start talking about how it's gonna go. Right? What are the probable and possible ways things could go? And you have a gas fireplace. You're gonna have to provide fuel for it, gas stove, gas heat, you have to provide, well, I don't wanna do that, you're gonna be signing a contract that says that you're gonna provide that. You're selling a house for 400,000. Put a little propane in the tank. Make it go smooth, avoid arguments.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a gray area. Because even with the bold letters, and again, I'm being an ass. Seller will have heating. Yes. Sellers will have heating and all utilities. If you have a fireplace, that's not part of the heat source? In the heat source.
It might be. Yeah, it's stuck to the wall, it's a heat source.
I agree. Absolutely. Just stuck on the.
What do you think? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, inspections. I have one top of that is, jump up and down. Make people aware that they really need to get inspected. I mean, the exceptions would be, you have investors that they've been through this before. They bought houses, you've seen them in action. They know what they're doing. They know how to walk through a house. They know how to add up what a board costs. They know these things, and if they don't want to get inspection, fine. You have a contractor buying a house, they're gonna fix up and rent it out. They don't want to do inspections, and you've seen them go through the house, you've seen them in the crawl space in the basement. And, you know, they have some assumption that they might know what they're talking about. You know, fine, but still make it clear that you still recommend that they have inspection. Would be
Yeah,
the guy saying, you don't need to do that.
contractor like that, I consider an educator. So in that case, contract contractor. Certainly don't get inspectors out, but if somebody been in the contractor business for down. But short of that, I recommend that buyers and sellers. You know, once in a while I get a seller and say, well, I'll take the deal, but I don't want to do inspection. Red flag, right? Why don't you make the seller inspection? Well, you're ready. So put up a red flag. But I explained to the seller, for your own good, let the buyer get their inspection. Best thing for you, let the buyer get their inspection. You don't have to do anything. If you get that seller that says, no, I'm not fixing anything. Well, we agree and said that. But, I encourage sellers to certainly not negotiate, but the buyer can't get inspected. And buyers should get an inspection. You know that 80% of lawsuits, 80% of real estate lawsuits are non-disclosure. Non-disclosure. Seller did not disclose them. That's why, and you'll see those stats if you use your program, right? You'll see that right on their website. So let everybody get their inspections and encourage buyers and sellers to get their inspections. And
It depends on the seller. It depends on the seller. At times I might say do an inspection prior to us going live to the listing. That's part of the listing consultation with them. But then they're not, no, I won't say savvy, but if they don't understand how the whole process with even just maintaining your home, you can see that as you walk through. Recommend that, you know, to get ahead of things. Have you ever thought about it when inspect fire so you can address certain things? I don't want to tell them, hey, that furnace is like, you know, I want to let them hear it and see it on the report that these are some things that need to be addressed prior to going live. It might take a little longer, but it can save the deal on the back end. Because now if you already know, or that's also price adjustment. But
If they do, does that mean the stuff that they found out, obviously uploaded as disclosures, they have to change?
But it disclosing,
Yeah,
yeah, I think pre-listing corrections are extremely good. It's tough to go to. But I think it's a good way to go, and I can see it more where the seller would do it, inspection. And then the benefit also for the seller, there's no surprises there, you know. There's no surprises, so. They don't have to address, they just have to display.
we actually had the, well, prior to going live, we're having the spring shot tested, because it's spring.
Sure.
And it's actually in the state, so the daughter's like, "It's clean." Like, this is why we're doing this prior with the water. Spring shocking tested, so we know.
Yeah.
Well, you were saying before, sometimes when you're talking to your sellers, they say, I'm not fixing anything, you know, right out of the gate before you even went live on the listing. You recommend that you tell your seller to advertise that they're not doing anything, right out of the gate. I don't either, so I was just curious what about that. Well, yes is yes, but like sometimes people, sellers just wanna put it out there. But, well, even if the house looks decent, why are we telling everybody as is?
Yeah, that's a piece. That's even from the seller of some property as is, to me, that raises a red flag right away. As is. David and I keep going back to this all the time. Let the agreement say the word, oh, you do not have to fix it. We'll show you in the agreement, we do not have to fix it. But let's not say that it's as is, because that does raise a red flag. Yeah, I would.
And it's the way it's stated in the agreement sale is, let's say, as is in the agreement sale, but it's in the condition. That's what it is. And if, there's so much of the issues that we have are just flat out lack of communication. You just explain to your client, the buyer, okay, these are certain rights, everybody wants to focus on what they get out of the deal, right? That's a huge thing, there are my benefits out of it. Or we have to also talk to them about what are their responsibilities in this deal. You have to perform your inspections within these 10 days or whatever. You got to get that done with it. That's your responsibility. In order to get to the right, you got to fulfill your responsibility as a seller. You want to sell this house for, $400,000 or whatever it is. It says right here that you have to put propane in a tank. It's not making a big deal. Let's just do these things. You got to let people in the house, right? You have to provide access. So, everybody out like what their rights are, what their responsibilities are. And, I'd love to think that everybody that we're involved with, that we're all adults in the room, but not always. So we have to be clear, rinse and repeat.
I do tell my seller, if as is, if something comes back, it is something major, and then we have to have a conversation.
Well,
I do let them know that.
and a great way to do that, to explain that to them, is to show where it is right in the contract. It is in the house is being sold in present condition, unless something comes up that needs to be addressed and get negotiated. Otherwise, this is the house.
But the seller needs to also know that they don't have to do anything at all. Even if something comes up, they don't have to fix it. They're buying it in its present condition. So they don't have to fix anything. Now, something major comes up, then I address that when that major comes up. And what I explained to the seller is that we have a problem here with the septic system. The problem here with the septic system. I'm not fixing anything. Well, you can't sell a house without a functional septic. So you're gonna have to fix it for some buyer. Well, why don't you fix it for this buyer? And then let's move forward. And that's how I handle it. And then, what we do. I should say this. A lot of times when the buyers are saying, the sellers are saying, I'm not fixing anything. They change their story sometimes when you get that inspection report. And they want to see the transaction.
When I hear when I hear people say that, like, if you're a seller, I'm not fixing anything, or a buyer, I'm not budging on this or whatever, I like this has been very successful for me, is to tell people, like, let's not try to answer questions that haven't been asked. When something comes up, we'll look at it, we'll see what makes sense, we'll see what works in your best interest. And then answer the question at that time, but if you are gonna answer these questions ahead of time, you might be doing yourself a service.
You get some sellers, back to the as is, get some sellers that want to have their attorney review the contract, and one of their comments they put in is, buyers buying as is where it is. Not always make it. It is where it is. And you say it. Where it is. Okay. Where are we?
Well, you know, we're still in the inspection, but.
Yeah.
I think you get to know all these categories. And, you know, radon, get to know what the numbers are and things like that, and just, you know. Review this with your clients, you know, take the time. Take the time to go over this, you know, and
Yeah, I think the other thing that, a lot of agents, get hung up with, or the buyers get hung up with a lot of agents, is they don't understand, buyers do not understand what the inspections are for. They're not, inspections are not for repairing a cracked window. That's physically, you can see that, you know, don't ask for the cracked window. Explain to them that it's for major problems. Material defects. What's the definition of a material defect? On the front page of the disclosure. Material defect is anything that could be a safety hazard or could affect the value of the property. So most of what we see buyers coming back with and wanting to correct it is not a material defect. So I explained, and I just received an offer, had 18 items on the reply to inspect. And some of them so dumb. And I called the agent, I said, you know, why do you have 18 items on this? And especially some, majority of them, there might have been maybe 4 that could be talked about, the other 14 were garbage, you know? And he said, well, that's what they wanted. Well, why didn't you have a conversation with that buyer saying, you know, we can list these 18 items, but you're probably gonna tick the seller off, and they may not negotiate anything. So let's take maybe 4 items, and the most serious one, let's take 4 items, not like 5 or 6 or something like that, but if there's out of 18, there's 4, why don't we take the 4 major ones and let's work on getting those correct? Because the rest is all cosmetic that you can do yourself. Have that conversation with your buyers, that what's the inspection really for? Have that when you're getting the agreement sale price. Inspecting over the inspector, what's the real reason for inspection?
the best, firefighter inspection I ever got was, just literally said. All the things in the inspection. I kept that, I probably have it in, I don't think it's a command, but it's. Way back. All the things. So when I go to inspections with buyers. You know, we're looking at the house. And I remind them that the purpose of the inspection and the buyer final inspection, this is about like discovery, right? Install the solar enclosure, you walk through the house maybe twice. You know what the house looks like, you know, if the carpet is mud here or there, whatever it is. You know all those things. The inspection is to find out things that you don't know. That's what we're gonna focus on. And material defects, things that are gonna affect the safety and livability of the house. And possibly the value of the appraisal. We're gonna look at those things. But, you know, stuff that you already know about. That's going into your all today.
Right. Yep. The seller does have a right to a copy of the inspections. And so do you, as the listing agent, have a right to the copy of the inspection reports. So say a seller does get a pre-listing inspection done, so you got the inspection reports there, or you have a transaction, you have a listing, the inspections were done, fell apart because of the inspection. Now you got a copy of that report. And you have to disclose that inspections were done, right? You have to either give a copy of those inspection reports, and seller disclosure also, you have to either put the inspection reports, include the inspection reports as a seller, as part of the seller disclosure, or you gotta do an addendum to the seller disclosure. Because if there's something on those items and they've been fixed, you can put on, yeah, they were there, but we fixed it. Nothing wrong, I mean, all of us that own homes know that, you know, if the house is 6 months old, you probably have a repair to the makeup, so. You know, there's nothing wrong with disclosing what was repaired and what was done. So, but the point I wanna get to is, so now we have an inspection report. Now you have a buyer, you're working with a buyer, and you have inspection reports. Well, then I don't have to do my inspection. I'll just use the inspections that were already done, so I don't have to do my inspection. Yes or no? Do they have to?
Sure.
Should.
We can't vote, so the one person who is the seller.
Yeah.
And some time may have passed, and other things may have.
And one of the key ones though is. We have a form, and it's in our command, we have a form there for previous inspection. And that says. That the buyer has received a copy of the previous inspection, has received a copy of the previous inspection. For informational purposes only, not to be relied on. Because if it's something, if they take that report, and say, well, I don't have to do my own inspection. Right. They have no recourse with that inspector, the inspector in this one. Because they did not pay that inspector, they didn't hire that inspector to do it, so they have no recourse. It's coming. So that's why I explained to buyers, you don't use it for informational purposes, but you still need to get your own inspection done.
And I think what may be important to one person
It's not really,
is not to the next
Yeah.
person. So you should get your own inspections done.
and if you've ever been in a position that had 2 inspections done at the same home. Yes. Different inspectors pick up different things.
So, show of hands. Does anybody here have inspectors they would rather not see again? There's the difference. This goes to show you there's a difference between inspectors.
There's no inspector that I can't stand it, but if they're doing everything going like, great, we're gonna say sail right through.
I just want to clarify, right, so if you're having someone do a pre-listing inspection. If some problems come up, or you haven't around or so, if fix them, right, and then,
They could, or they don't have to, but they have to disclose.
okay, so those reports then will be loaded up onto the listing. And documents,
Sure, they just
They
disclose it
can
themselves.
do nothing says that you cannot. I would refer them putting the product comments that section was completed. Rather than just.
That's
Yeah,
and then just,
but it's still, you know, it doesn't hurt inspection there because it's. Right, selling the closure. Yeah. Yeah.
they don't fix anything really,
We don't have to fix anything, but it's advisable to.
I mean, if it's something.
Maybe revise my.
Yeah, but even.
They can offer, you know, part of the listing, part of the market. You know, like, you know, $10,000 for new flooring throughout the home if it's bad, something like that, you know, part of the marketing.
But the other way that I would try to coach my seller is we have 15 things here, and most of them are minor. $2,000 fix all. Let's fix. Let's fix so they don't have questions somebody, because something that's actually minor major buyer. That's just fixing what's out of the.
And I hope the curve is good. We hope the curve is good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a question for the buyer side.
Yes.
You get that. You know how it says both of them put in there, have a contract. Have a contract. So if you have electrical work. It's really difficult to get a contractor in a time frame that's gonna work. With the whole process. How do you handle it?
Well.
To
First,
be able to know how much the repairs cost.
and the inspectors. Written. And two. Say, well, this is going to. The inspector does not allow second. Anything. Or any. So.
Well, third parties most of the time, which they are allowed. Those third parties are like Zillow with an algorithm. So you don't really know how accurate those estimates are.
Yeah. Then you get an extension. You know.
Other ones.
Sales. Good contract. We've done that, I mean, that's not right there. But, yeah, that's, the only is get an extension. But, again, difficult to tell us to do it. Pre-existing inspection, that was solved.
It might be, it's a litigated. You down the basement or wherever, and you look at the electrical panel and it's all rusty. And maybe there's no cover on it, there's a bunch of holes in it. This is coming up, you know this is coming up in inspection, so let's address it now.
Yeah, the wiring looks like spaghetti.
There was a kind of a panel, I don't even recall one, I can't remember the whole thing, but it was something like specific.
Yeah.
Something or other, and it looked like, you know, like there were pennies jammed in to make a connection or something. We're a very strange thing, and it was just like nailed to a board that was sort of screwed to the wall and it was hanging off, and that, you know, that one got replaced.
Okay, next question? Well, we didn't get the feature. We didn't get the electric. But if we, I'm not really concerned about reaching the goal. It's important that we have a conversation, you know, we have questions, and all that. But that's more important than worrying about getting to the report. That's why we. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, it's. A lot of, every time I think it's trying to do. So is your friend or is? Where do you live? Okay. I'm actually having fun running on it. With your 8 o'clock. You? You know where you need me? I see.